What's going on, folks? This is Matt here for Dark One Linux Tech and Gaming, where this is a fusion of Linux technology and gaming, and we are looking at somebody I really don't want him. So before anyone says it's because they're successful and all this other shit, no. Point blank, I'm going to tell you, this is not a shtick that I do. These are honest reactions. I am not a person that likes opinions that are pushed as a fact when they're an opinion. There's a difference. Now, you can have an opinion and a different point of view based around a fact. That's different. But when you're viewed as an authority and that opinion is not factually correct is where I have issues. Especially when it comes to this particular person, because they do it quite frequently. Provocateur and all this other shit. I'm just going to be real. They're worse than the other person I don't like, which is Lunduke. They make Lunduke look actually mild. So, let's get into First Titus Text, the Linux tier list. And here's my fucking reaction to it, because this is going to be long, this is going to be painful, and I'm probably going to definitely more than likely have a fucking ulcer from this. Let's roll into what dipshit has to say.
We choose violence when we do a Linux tier list. And honestly, people get really upset, especially when it's an honest tier list about where you are in your Linux journey. You're going to learn a lot in this video. I've already filled in the S tier. It's Debian and Arch. Nothing else goes in the S tier. Debian and Arch, when it comes to Linux desktop, are supreme. Nobody can debate this. I just won't accept any other thing. So let's move on from that.
I rest my case right there. Nothing else can, these are supreme. These are it. This is the fact of the matter. No. The fact of the matter is you just gave an opinion that is totally irrelevant, because it does not, and I'm going to emphasize this, it does not take into consideration the use cases of the user. You are taking a fucking Windows or a Mac OS approach to Linux, and the whole point of Linux is finding the right solution for you, the user. That's what it boils down to. Freedom and all the other stuff is great, and I'm not going to get into the philosophical versus pragmatist point of view and all the other shit. That overinflated opinion spewed as fact just degrades the entire argument of whatever the fuck you're going to put here. Now, what you could have said is these are the core distros that you probably might want to know the best. So Arch or Debian or Fedora or Red Hat or whatever you consider the main base distros, etc. That's a more realistic approach. That's a more honest approach than giving an opinion that is solely skewed based on your perceived way of looking at Linux and the Linux landscape. So, no. There's more than just two supreme distros, you fucking ever-loving goddamn chode. There's gonna be a lot. We choose violence. I choose really bad words to go with the violence.
From that, explain the other tiers here. Hopefully you learn a lot. The pointless tier is going to make everybody mad, because more than half of these distributions, all 40 or something that we have down here, will probably end up in the pointless tier, which is going to make some folks mad. But I will explain why I put those things in the pointless tier and how possibly some of them can get out of the pointless tier. Let's explain the tiers real fast to break it down. Amazing for new users. These are your noobs, just fresh, coming from like Windows or Mac or some other operating system. They don't know anything about Linux. Typically, this is where I point them. And most people will move on from the amazing tier, but some people will not, and that's okay. So that's what's going to end up here. Best for business. Kind of self-explanatory. Business distributions. Creative and unique. These are distributions that are kind of around, but they are so unique that nobody really uses them, or they're real niche, but they're unique enough to where they're not just a copy or a fork. The devil tier, this is going to be your big companies that do just silly things, and there's usually a lot of drama around the devil tier. So that's what's going to end up here. I think you already know what's going to end up in there if you've watched many of my past videos. The lightweight tier, this is where you put distros on anything and everything. This could be as small as a toaster, a Seagate drive I've installed some Linux distributions on, things that almost have no compute power, old netbooks that might be thrown out, that 10-year-old laptop sitting in that drawer. Typically, the distributions here will end up in those low-powered devices. And then the pointless tier, where most everything will reside, is just a fork, a copy, a slow gimmick, maybe a couple pre-installed programs that you should install yourself on like a Debian or Arch. There's going to be a lot of stuff in here, and I'll label those as such. Let's get in.
Can you not dick ride on Debian and Arch? You take the wrong approach to computing altogether, you ever-loving douche. So, what I'm going to say is pointless is you doing this fucking list, seeing how you ran back to Windows and Mac OS, and that's where you do your content. You know, whatever, do you. I don't really honestly fucking care. Honestly, I would prefer to never have to fucking react to any of your stupid opinions ever again, but people want to subjugate me to fucking hell on earth, apparently. So, as far as distros that are pointless, yes, there are some redundant distros. I will give him this point. There are some redundant distros. There are just simple reskins and maybe some pre-installed apps, etc., etc., etc. Fair point. Some. If what I'm seeing on here for all of these little, you know, icons and stuff, he's going to have a really, really shit, dumbass take on so many levels.
Let's get into it, not waste any time. Alma Linux, best for business. Honestly, if I had...
Let's not waste any time. I'm wasting my fucking time reacting to this. Trust me, I do not want to. I'm going to fucking probably want to bash my head through the goddamn plate glass window and fucking jab fucking shards of glass in my ears to puncture my eardrum so I never fucking have to hear you again. But here we are. Because again, people want to fucking torture me. I guess this is what happens when I make a goddamn reaction channel. But here we go. So Alma, okay, cool. That's for business. Sure.
If I had Rocky's icon, I'd also put Rocky and Alma in here. Oracle would also reside into the best for business. These are one-to-one equivalents of Red Hat. Red Hat is the devil. I think we can easily establish that because they destroyed CentOS and made it from downstream to upstream. So CentOS used to be something completely different. Fun fact, CentOS was my very first Linux distribution that I worked with for years professionally, installing stuff. CentOS Stream is not CentOS. CentOS Stream is a bastardized version that Red Hat changed around after they bought them out. They've recently closed their source code. A lot of drama there. I'm not going to go into it.
Did you actually talk to anybody fucking at Red Hat? Like, actually at Red Hat? Close their source code? No. The way it's available is different. Yes. Context fucking matters, Chris. And you never, for the love of fucking Christ, this is what I hate about you. You do not give clear, full context. You want to talk about a bastardized version of anything. You are a bastardized version of a tech YouTuber because you do not give context. And when it comes to stuff like this, context fucking matters. Is Red Hat the devil? They're a fucking business. Did they get bought out by IBM? Sure. But if you think it was always going to be fucking rainbows and sunshines because everyone dick rides for fucking Red Hat at the time, then you were a fucking naive moron like anybody else who dick rides for fucking Red Hat. The bottom line is what fucking matters to those places and the shareholders. I'm not saying it's a right decision or the wrong decision. That's the decision they made. And I'm not going to bitch and complain that a company that I know is for profit is going to make a decision that suits them best. So I hope you don't plan on using anything from GTK or GNOME or anything remotely related to that, because if you're going to use that, if you're going to go full bore on that end of the spectrum of technology and stuff, you damn well better you make sure you don't use anything Red Hat provides the fucking community, because then you're just going to be a fucking hypocrite who spews shit out of you, that shit hole on your fucking face called your mouth. This is the same people who I detest when they whine and complain that, oh, well, you know, it's China. Yeah, China does some stupid shit. Did you buy a fucking Lenovo? Did you buy RAM? Did you buy something from fucking China? Then guess what? Go to the logical end of that fucking argument. You're either going to be fully principled or you're not. Where's your fucking compromise? See, this is the thing. It's disingenuous. He oozes total disingenuous person is what he comes across as, with a willful ignorance about the ecosystem and everything the fuck around it. And this is the shit that irks me.
But that's why these end up in the devil tier, and controversially, Fedora will also end up in here. I actually recommended Fedora this past year. I thought the releases have gotten so much better, and then I was like, maybe that CentOS 8 drama, it's behind us. Maybe Red Hat has changed their ways, and then everything coming out. Fedora makes it into here, especially this week with them proposing opt-out telemetry. So Fedora is in the devil tier. Nothing I'd ever recommend using anymore. Everything from Red Hat kind of goes into here. Why we're got
again, context matters. Did you actually look at the fucking context of what they're looking to collect? Or the overall fucking proposal? Or did you just grab the fucking headline and do what you always do and be the provocateur and spew some dumb shit that comes out of your fucking shit maker of a mouth? Like, Jesus fucking Christ. Even KDE has fucking goddamn telemetry. Is it opt-in? Sure. Like, here's the thing. If they make it clear and present to the user, whether it's defaultly clicked or fucking not, who the fuck cares? If you can't uncheck a fucking box, that's a you problem. That's a user problem. As long as the information is provided up front to the user in clear and concise manner, that's what matters. And doesn't do the bullshit that Microsoft does. Doesn't do the bullshit that Mac OS does or Android does or whatever. That's what matters. And I love the fact that you want to talk about privacy, but you will shill and whore yourself for Microsoft. You will shill whore yourself for other things that are much more privacy invasive. You want to talk like a principled person. The only principle you have is how to shill yourself and whore yourself out for content. That's it. Like, people want to think I do this because, you know, I think it'll blow up. No, I do this because this shit fucking irks me as a tech guy in general, because I see these disingenuous, disconnected, stupid fucking people totally forget what it's like to be the normal fucking user. And I'm speaking as a guy that uses Linux every fucking day. Yeah, I don't have my head shoved so far up my own ass that I gotta use the CLI for everything. Because I have the perspective and understanding that 99% of people are not us.
I got people mad from the Red Hat crowd. Let's just upset the Ubuntu people. Let's just toss Ubuntu in here. Come on. I'm going to explain this in one word. Apt install Firefox. Actually, that's 3 words. But one command, I should say. And that is, why does that change it to a snap? What's up, Ubuntu? You've just gone from this great OG, original, noob-friendly distribution to just stay the hell away from it as far as desktop goes. You'll still see Ubuntu on like servers, and they do have some kind of business-esque server type thing, but this is Linux desktop we're talking about. nobody really wants to use Ubuntu anymore, and that's why it makes it in the devil tier.
No, you stupid ever-loving cock knocker. It makes into the devil tier because you have a total disregard and understanding that it's a for-profit company. Again, you come across as this principled person, but you bend those principles. Those very principles that you're whining about, you will shill and whore for with the other ones. And I'll be the first to admit, I use Windows, I use Android, I use Mac OS. I use all the shit. But there's a level of pragmatism that and understanding of where your line is. But you preach like this is, you know, oh, bad, blah, blah, blah. But you will shill and whore yourself for the very things that you're talking about. You are so contradicting your own fucking principles that it's not even funny. So is your career based on Windows? Is your career based on Linux? Is your career just whoring yourself for whatever's going to give you the paycheck? And I don't fault anybody for getting the goddamn money and getting their goddamn paycheck. But don't come across like a principled jackass when the only principles you have and so willingly show is that you're a fucking hypocrite to those principles that you spew.
Next, we got Alpine Linux. Alpine Linux is amazing. It uses, I think, OpenRC, and it's just such a great distribution to load up on containers. You see it all the time in containers. It uses an APK package manager, super, super light, and you're going to run into it a lot in the business realm, especially when you're dealing with Docker containers or Kubernetes. You're going to run into a lot of Alpine stuff. So really kind of cool. Check it out. I did a 10-minute video over on Titus Tech Talk you should check out, just kind of overviewing a quick install and configuration of Alpine. Antix, this is a lightweight distro, kind of a really cool one. It boots up really fast. Much like Alpine, it uses a kind of a really unique system. It doesn't use systemd. I think it's also like a run it init system, so it starts up super fast. You can load it up on anything. It's probably one of my favorite lightweight distros that doesn't get enough love. Love it. Arco Linux. We're going to start making people mad again. Arco Linux is in the pointless tier. I love their Git. I steal a lot of stuff from Arco. They have so many cool customizations, and they do a great job of kind of making a new user feel at home. The problem is it's on Arch. And honestly, if you don't know how to install Arch, and you don't know the inner workings of Arch, I don't think you should be in an Arch distribution. It's not to downplay any of the contributions they make, and I like to steal stuff from Arco all the time. It's really kind of cool, but at the same time, I don't think the distribution should exist. Those people, those talented individuals over there should move on and probably just recontribute to upstream Arch, you know.
And this is the other problem I have with Chode Boy. What he doesn't understand, and he admits it himself that he steals, he uses the contributions that the team at Arco do for their distribution. If you are not intelligent enough to understand how Arch works already, and the community around it and what they're looking for, the shit that Arco down here provides is not the shit that these guys are looking for. So hence the distribution. These guys provide something that these guys don't do. It's novel concept, Chris. They add to the Arch ecosystem and bring more quote-unquote users to Arch or Arch-based distros and new ways and new presentations and all the other fun stuff that goes along with making new fucking programmers or new users who will potentially be new programmers who will then contribute to, say, an Arco or an Arch or a gateway into the inner workings of that shit. This is what you don't fucking stand about all of these distributions. Any distribution that you're going to put in here that I've seen for a fucking on this goddamn list, you don't get. That's what they all fucking do. They add to the ecosystem. New users, new approaches, new thought processes. Because how one wants to design here or how one wants to design here is not how Deep In or Elementary are going to want to design. Because these guys are not looking at something that these guys are. That's all it is. So if you think, oh, just contribute back upstream, it doesn't always work that way.
You know, because Arch is what makes this possible, and you could just take the customizations they make and put it into Arch, and you better understand it, and you'd be less likely to break. So now that we've said that, there's a bunch of distributions we kind of need to toss in here along with it, with that same explanation. Manjaro, pointless. What happens with Manjaro? You're like, wait a second, it has some of the best customization. Titus, noobs can install Manjaro on Arch. Same problem, right? The noob will go to the AUR. They will download a bunch of crap and they will break Manjaro. I know, because I did it. And
you did it because you're an ever-loving idiot. Anybody who, regardless of distribution, if you're adding different repos, etc., doesn't matter the distro. Fucking RPM Fusion, insert PPA fucking thing here, mixing and matching and Debian and stable and testing and, you know, all the other shit and distros and repos and other ways to add stuff. You have the potential to always break your system. And the last I used Manjaro could have changed. I will say this. It could have changed. The last I used Manjaro, they made it not so easy to get quite as accessible to the AUR and more whatever their default repos were using. So, yeah. Kind of a moot point. And as far as breaking and all the others, and I'm not a Manjaro guy. I will be the first to admit, I'm not a Manjaro guy. But that logic has a logical fallacy when it applies to everything across the board. When you are talking about the same goddamn thing. Just with a different fucking name.
And honestly, Manjaro itself, even though Philip Mueller, the main dev over at Manjaro, is very talented as well, the problem with it is, hell, I remember in 2019, I just did a Pac-Man SYU to upgrade the entire system. It broke because I didn't read the patch notes. And it should have been like a SYYUC or some different kind of upgrade path. And because I didn't do it according to that specific patch, it broke my Manjaro. That shouldn't happen. It just shouldn't happen. Manjaro shouldn't exist. And if you need that type of level of expertise, you shouldn't be using Manjaro. You should just use the Supreme Arch Linux. So that's where that is. Now, I think Arctix is kind of a unique one. I kind of want to put it in the pointless tier, but I kind of...
You should be using the Supreme Arch. Okay. Oh, hey, look, I have no sound subsystem. What command do I use? Go read the wiki. Yeah, great fucking response. I'm not sure if you're elitist or you're elitely fucking retardedly stupid. I'm not sure. Because either way, you're an elitist, all right. Just not sure which direction of that spectrum you're on.
I kind of don't. I almost want to put this in the creative unique tier because it's like Arch, but it differs in one way that I was corrected. Originally, I did put it in the pointless tier because I just thought, hey, it's just another Arch fork. But it doesn't use systemd. So the init system is different and it starts up really, really fast. So if you're really into Arch and you kind of want to change your init system, but kind of want to have your hand held a little bit, Ardix can be in that creative, unique system. So I'm going to change it from my earlier designation. Clear Linux is next, and I'm going to throw Clear Linux in the creative, unique, because it's a really amazing distribution from Intel, but I would never use it as a desktop. It's really fast. If you have an Intel chip, you'll see that it does usually have a little higher performance than many other Linux distributions, but it's weird because
and if you actually knew your stuff, you would also see that those improvements also work on Ryzen. As far as the distros that he selected, this category can apply to fucking all of these. That is what I'm trying to get people to understand. All of these add something different to the ecosystem. Doesn't matter if it's just packages and a precompiled settings, etc. While you might think it doesn't matter for the out-of-the-box experience, you don't actually know what the mythological user is. You are so deep into the tech end, and I'm using this very politely when I say this. You have your head shoved so far into tech end's ass at this point that your perspective is a bit full mooned. A lot of shade, a lot of dark. Because you can't see a different angle and a different perspective and look behind you and actually see through the fucking bubble that you've put up. So now, antics, yeah, different, different internet system, Clear Linux, performance improvements, etc. around stuff. Its own, I believe it was its own package manager and just kind of a different way of doing stuff. That's fine. You can, and the nice thing is, you can take those things from here and here and here and put them in the other distro, or not. You don't want to use the version of GCC. Change it. Use an older, use a newer, whatever. That's what all these offer. And sometimes those minute choices like that, Chris, are a game changer to the distro and the needs of a user. It's a novel concept.
Weird because the package manager swap-d is really hard to work with, and you can't really build a whole bunch. Creating a dev environment in Clear Linux, not the most fun thing. Now, if you're heavily into using Flatpak and you're okay with kind of having that immutable operating system that doesn't change very much, it's almost impossible to break Clear Linux. It's unique enough. I love how they leverage every single bit of systemd. They don't even use fstab for mounting drives. They use systemd auto mount. They were one of the first distributions really to use systemd boot and really leverage all those systemd services without adding grub and all these other packages that many other distributions use. So it's unique enough to where I'm like, you know what, I like what they're doing, and Clear Linux kind of goes in that creative, unique category for me. Deepin, all right, let's keep going with that. It's pointless. Now, people are like, wait a second, Deepin's a desktop environment. It's amazing. Titus, what's wrong with your head? I'm like, okay, don't worry. Deepin is an amazing desktop environment. It has some of the best scaling. It's great. But as a distribution, it's kind of pointless. Like, I'd much rather just install Debian and then toss the Deepin desktop environment on top of it, and then I'm not worried about what's going on in the back end with Deepin. Same kind of goes with many of these distributions.
I'm going to be brutally honest. You cannot be that fucking naively retarded. And I'm not even talking about like the back end stuff and, quits up. So it's spyware, blah, blah. I'm not even getting into that. If you cannot recognize that the work that was done on Deepin for the desktop has contributed to the other aspects of like where people actually give a shit about the UI overall, because I don't know if you noticed, beforehand, while Linux users really didn't fucking care about the goddamn UI design. Despite GNOME's HIG and everything else, they didn't care. A lot of people do now. And a lot of that work is because of things like Deepin. And I see Elementary is probably going to get thrown in there because of just given how fucking retardedly stupid your takes are. That doesn't surprise me. Because you don't see the value in these things. Because you don't understand what these distributions are aiming for. Deepin is for the Chinese fucking market. Now, as far as like the desktop and stuff, it's very Windows, whatever, insert version here, or you can make it Mac OS if you want the passion mode or whatever. The point remains, Deepin was doing stuff that no other distro was doing at the time, barring maybe Ubuntu with Unity. So to cast all that off and to simply say, oh, I'll install it in base Debian or Arch, it's kind of like trying to install Pantheon or Budgie. You can do it. It's not always the most ideal fucking experience. Because of the way they build it is different than the upstream. Because their needs are different than the fucking upstream. Big thoughts. Real hard. Booga booga.
KDE Neon. People love... I know I love KDE. It's a great desktop environment, but as a distribution, KDE Neon is just silly. Like, what is going on? Why do they have apt and then they have another package manager on top of it?
They say it's not a distro. That's all I need to say about it. Their own words. It's not a distro. What more do I need to say?
I get that's your dev environment, but you really want to distribute that to a whole bunch of noobs? No. Stay away from KDE Neon. Stay away from Deepin. Stay away from Elementary, honestly. If we're going down this road, it just doesn't jive with me. So,
and therein lies the fucking problem. It doesn't jive with you. That's fine. But you're talking like these are facts, and they are not facts because you are not looking at them objectively for what they are aiming for. And this is why I think your takes are so fucking stupid, because you cannot objectively look at stuff. People take your word for fucking God on Linux, and I don't fucking get it, because when you objectively look at this shit and understand what these different projects and different DEs and desktops and fucking distros, etc., are going for, their niches and different people and different use cases. And no, it's not going to be one size fits all. And to try to, and I'm always been one for more of a standardized package manager, etc., around Linux. So seeing things like Snap and App Image and Flatpak take off, cool. Makes the distro not fucking matter to me. But I can also understand that these are aiming at different fucking things. And you, my friend, and I use that term very fucking loosely, are too fucking dumb or idiotic with your approach because you think you're right all the time about shit. And when people call you out, well, that's what the comment section's for, as other interactions have shown in the past. So, this is me saying, understand what the goal of the distribution is. But because you refuse to see that, and you only see, realistically, in your opinion, 2 fucking options, then anything anybody says in this is just, there's no point in arguing with you about it. And it's not even arguing or debating or pushing back on you when it comes to this shit. Because it's a stupid take. Because you don't apparently understand what the ecosystem is. Like, as it is right now. I'm not saying it's good or bad. I'm just saying as it is, this is what these projects do. And this is what they benefit and detract from. Now, you can say what they detract from is the main distros, but then you have to look at the main distros and say, is this shit that they want in the distro? And 9 times out of 10, you're probably going to find the answer is going to be fucking no. So yeah, then people are going to take the tools that are already available around a base and build around that base. But they're going to start changing and modifying the base a lot to fit the need.
So we're going to grab elementary, toss it in here too. There's a lot of desktop environments that are great, but them making a distribution to go along with the desktop environment doesn't make any sense to me. Just go grab a good distro that's a base and then go right here. Because what happens when you start forking off of these, because all 3 of these are Debian forks, which come from, Ubuntu's a fork of Debian, and then it forks off of Ubuntu into these. That's a fork of a fork. Going all the way to upstream, there's many things they do, and then they're like, oh crap, we probably should rebase things or come back into these and grab these fixes. It just gets messy, and I just don't like that. Like, why wouldn't you just use the OG Debian?
Because the OG Debian does not provide what they are looking for. So they go with the one that provides what they're looking for. Like, I don't get what is so fucking hard for you to understand about this. And sometimes it's a compromise. It's like when I have X money, I need Y machine. What are you willing to compromise? I mean, you very, very clearly are willing to compromise your principles that you so talk about with things being the devil and shit. Go run some Windows apps there, homie.
I just don't understand it. Debian's gotten so good over the past couple years that I just don't see a purpose to these distributions. I like the contributions. I like the desktop environment, but it's where it kind of falls.
If you like the contributions, but you can't understand what they contribute overall, then that's a you problem and you not understanding the full scope of the contribution. You ever-loving fucking Chad idiot.
Falls for me. In that same realm, we got Endeavor and Garuda too. Let's just grab both the Arch base spins. Really cool customizations, huge amount of programs, same problem as Manjaro. We're going to kind of leave it there.
And I'm going to say this as a Garuda user. Do you realize why I use Garuda? Because in 20 minutes, I can have an up and running system. And in 20 minutes, I'm based on AMD. And in 20 minutes, I don't have to deal with fucking drivers. And I can have all my gaming shit in 20 minutes. Because all my games are stored externally. So guess what? Up running. And it's the out-of-the-box experience, which you don't grasp because you have maybe a half a brain of a third of a fucking segment left as it relates to a fucking new user. They got about one goddamn brain cell left after listening to this goddamn video. The out-of-the-box experience matters. That quick setup matters to a user. That's it. That's what the users are looking for. The users are looking for a solution and a tool they need to figure out that solution. Instead, we get people like you who offer tools that don't work for that person to find that solution, which there in turn makes you a fucking tool for offering the wrong goddamn solution. I'm not going to tell somebody with a fucking NVIDIA card to not go install Pop! OS simply because it's based on Ubuntu or it's based on Debian. So go use fucking Debian and install it. No. Are you too stupid to understand? I saw Pop! OS somewhere on fuck on here. Are you too stupid to realize that we have NVIDIA drivers on ISOs now because of what fucking Pop! OS did? If that doesn't improve the user experience and you don't understand that improves the overall user experience out of the box and initial setup, etc., then you are a goddamn lost cause that should not be fucking talking about Linux and new users and getting people to use fucking Linux. Because if you're going to look at this from like an admin server point of view and build everything yourself, etc., then you're talking to the wrong goddamn audience.
Farron OS, that's this one. Used to have a really good place years back when your Debian installer was not very good and it looked kind of like crap. It had really good defaults, but nowadays it's like, why? Why does it exist? Same thing. Gentoo, Gentoo.
I'm not a Farron OS guy, personally, but it exists because it offers something that things like Zorin OS don't offer. It offers that out-of-the-box experience. It offers it on Plasma. It offers it, it used to be on Mint and Cinnamon and all that stuff. It offers stuff that, while not for you, and that's okay, it offers stuff to people in the community. And that's what the whole fucking point is. Offer solutions to the community. And if the community take it up, cool. Then you found a community to build around.
Gentoo. Creative and unique. Nothing needs to be said about this other than Gentoo's great at building your own Linux kernel. Let's say you want to make, where I would like the world to go with Gentoo, is kiosks and let's say that menu at your favorite restaurant. Seeing like Windows blue screens of death when I'm going into like a big high-rise building, and I'm like, why is this using Windows? Why isn't it just using like a stripped-down version of Linux that will never break? That's where Gentoo comes in. You can create it to do one thing and do it amazingly, and then it'll never change. It'll be really minimal and just very secure. So, Gentoo is amazing.
The short version of what Moron's trying to say is that you can tailor Gentoo down to specifically what's on the hardware without all the cruft that a generalized kernel would not need. That's what he's trying to say. If you so go that route. There's also generic kernels where you can just download shit and use it as a general OS if you so decide.
Amazing for custom versions where you can de-bloat the Linux kernel, build it yourself, and then have a couple packages that are really easy. Using it as the daily driver, that's really for tryhards and people that just have a lot of time on their hands. So for Gentoo, I just throw it in the creative unique category because of that. Now this one is going to cause...
So if you try really hard to sound intelligent, I'm waiting for the day that the intelligence actually shows up.
A lot of people to be mad. And originally I was really concerned because when it comes to security and security researchers out there and ethical hackers, Kali Linux, oh man, they really love their Kali Linux. But guess what? It's pointless. It's absolutely pointless. They just have a whole bunch of pre-installed programs. Yeah, they have like some gimmicks like Windows mode and stuff like that. But really, if you're going into security researching, you need to learn the fundamentals. You need to learn networking. You need to learn the basics of a Linux system. You need to learn all these things, and you should be using its upstream of Debian and installing the...
If this doesn't make people understand why, at so many levels, I think he's a fucking idiot. It is a pre-configured tool set that takes a lot of the stuff that you would need when it comes to pen testing, white hat, and all that stuff that goes with that. It's not just a simple snore and a fucking Metasploit, you idiot. And a lot of the tool sets and a lot of the other stuff, it is a training tool for these people to get into what you're talking about. And it does other things like that you would not be able to do by default. There's a reason they tell you not to run it as a primary, because it runs as fucking root. The system is designed with a purpose. offensive. Maybe you should take an offensive security lesson, because goddamn, your take around what is approach to Linux security and everything else in Linux related is really fucking offensively fucking stupid.
Those things specifically. You need to use the burp sweep to do something, or you need to use Metasploit to exploit something. Install it on Debian, because that's all Kali Linux is. And if you can't install those programs and you can't make those customizations, well, you're just a script kiddie at that point to me. And I would emphasize this point just by saying all the people were upset about Kali Linux, but truly the security researchers that are really good, a lot of them aren't even using Kali Linux. A lot of them, you know, they're just like, I'm kind of lazy, I don't want to customize a version of Debian, and they'll just install Parrot. Parrot's actually, I think, better than Kali. It's a little more lightweight, has a lot of the same tool set, but less of the gimmicks, less of the bloat. So a lot of security researchers actually end up on Parrot instead of Kali. So I'm more worried about me saying Parrot's in the pointless tier based on everything I just said. I'd still put them in the pointless tier, and that's not good for my own self-preservation, because there's many talented people that do use these distributions. But honestly, they probably should just use Debian.
Look, if you want to be a fucking whore for goddamn 2 distributions and say, these are the 2 that I'm going to recommend, that's cool, bro. But if you're willingly, this thing, you're fucking willingly being so stupid about what these contribute to the overall ecosystem and what they do and the purpose they are built for. Purpose built. God, this video's hurt my fucking head.
So that's where I kind of put these ones. They do have really good tool sets, but at the end of the day, it's just pre-installed stuff that you could easily add to a Supreme distro. That's all I'm saying. Next up, let's grab something that isn't in the pointless tier, because I feel like I've gotten down on some distros. Some you just want to give to a new user. And this one's going to make some people mad. Probably my most controversial pick out of this entire tier list. And that's Kubuntu. And I think it's because it's a weak spot for me. With Kubuntu, I really love it for new users. It's so gentle for the Windows user coming over. You should move past Kubuntu. But from a KDE perspective, I think it has some of the best defaults. And you learn some of this stuff. But it's not just learning this stuff. A lot of it is learning some of the tool set of the stuff that comes with the distribution. And Kubuntu kind of a kid gloves approach to KDE for a new user. And that's why I love it for new users. And then people move past it usually. But it does have a really good collection of tools. Something I'd recommend way more than all these other distros I put in the pointless tier. So if you like KDE, you want to try it for the first time, Kubuntu is usually what I recommend, even though it's a fork of Ubuntu. And I'm not a really big fan of Ubuntu. So, yeah, that's kind of where I put it for amazing for new users. I would also put Linux Mint.
Don't let him keep going.
Mint here as well. Linux Mint has both a Debian spin and an Ubuntu spin in it. But it is another really good collection that's a very solid setup for a new user, to where I'd say, hey, most new users coming over, or maybe I set up something like my grandpa or something where I'm like, hey, you just need a web browser, you don't want to get it infected, and you just want it to work. I'd throw like Linux Mint on there because it's just so intuitive. There's graphic tools for everything, really good tool set built in, but at the end of the day, it's really good for just a new user. Now for Ubuntu, lightweight distro, it's okay. It has a good tool set. So if someone not as familiar with Linux that has like a potato tier kind of thing where they just need that super lightweight, will run on anything, and they'll have, you know, systemd, it'll have all the stuff that they're just accustomed to. It does use LXQT, which is a little bit different environment, but still pretty cool. MX Linux, you know, I would.
Okay, so I let Homebody here go on for a little bit. I want to make 3 observations here. And exactly what I mean when I say he compromises on what he talks about. Now, you just made 3 recommendations for Ubuntu, Kubuntu, and Linux Mint. Kubuntu, based on Ubuntu. Lubuntu, based on Ubuntu. Linux Mint, the main distro, not Linux Mint Debian Edition, is based on Ubuntu. You just compromised what you said you disliked about the devil after you put Fedora and other Red Hat spins in here. But you have no problem recommending Spawn of the Devil. Need I say more? You compromise and spew shit out of that fucking shit maker mouth of yours.
I would put this in the amazing for new users realm because it was a Debian fork, but Debian's just gotten so good to where MX Linux used to fill this niche, and anymore I'm just like, install Debian. Sorry, MX Linux crowd. That's rough for me because I really did like MX Linux. It's just I don't see a point in installing it these days.
Except for, again, out of the box experience. This is, again, what you don't understand. Out of the fucking box experience. That's what all these distros down here, they're bitching and whining and being a whore for, that are usually based around these, or calling this one the devil. All of these are out of the box experiences. Different ways, different bases, different applications, different use cases, different machines, etc. But you are being purposefully fucking stupid about this. And I'm not sure if it's ignorance or if it's just being willfully fucking dumb to your audience to have a fucking chode, provocateur, Brian Lunduke, idiotic fucking opinion. Because at the end of the day, it's coming across as the provocateur. I just want, you know, my paycheck kind of stuff anytime I talk about Linux. And it's like, give me a fucking break.
NixOS, I just did a video on it. It's reproducible builds for Linux. You can install anything, reproduce it really easily, and deploy it to 1,000 computers. Obviously, best for business. PC Linux OS is one thing that was kind of interesting. You know, 4 or 5 years ago, PC Linux OS would make it into like the amazing for new users because they'd use a lot of compatibility. Let's say you had a webcam that didn't work. You could use PC Linux OS and it might work where Debian might not. But these days, it hasn't seen many updates in, I think, several years now. And I just can't recommend it, and it ends up being the pointless tier because everything it used to do real well, Debian does now. So there's no point in it. Peppermint.
Except for it could have changed. Last I remember, PC Linux OS was based on Red Hat, Fedora. It was a RPM distro. I could be wrong. As far as stuff working, not working. Again, out of the box experience. I know Debian had talked about non-free binaries and all the other jazz and firmware, etc. I don't run flat Debian because I'm not ideologically driven when it comes to my fucking tool to use. The only ideological stuff I give a shit about is the amount I decide where I hit my line to give. So as an example, Windows 11 doesn't exist for me. Windows 10 is that line that I drew with Microsoft. The machine I do have with Windows is Windows 10. And it's the default ISO. It's a stripped down, no OEM crap. All that jazz is gone. I didn't use any of Ding Dong's fucking tools here. Everything is off as much as possible. I have my line in my sand as far as my principles or what I'm willing to give up. But I am also not willing to buy things that are not functional based on principle. So I am not an RMS guy. So I find it a bit hypocritical when this choding douche here wants to talk about, oh, just use, this because it has a better out of the box experience now. To a point. I mean, at one point, recommending Debian stable was like, hey, might as well go use fucking Triskel. Like that's basically what you were recommending. So this he wants to come across as a principal. I don't, this is the devil bullshit, etc. But if everything you look at, principled is not the term I would use for it.
Same thing, lightweight. I would say Peppermint has a little bit better package selection than Ubuntu. That's why it makes it in the lightweight realm for me. I really like it. And for the next one, Pop! OS. Oh man, 2 years ago, it ended up right here. It was an amazing distribution. I've even done a lot of videos and even had like my 9-year-old daughter at the time, install Pop! OS. It was great for new users, but it is a fork of Ubuntu using the GNOME desktop environment, and they really haven't evolved yet into another tier. I could totally see this coming back to here, or maybe even right here with the Cosmic tool set. They're moving on from GTK. They just haven't yet. And all they have going for it is like an NVIDIA spin that's good, but to me, it's pointless right now. But as Cosmic comes out and it becomes more unique, and there's actually more stuff that's just not copies with some tweaks, because, hey, Pop! OS back in the day, one cool thing it did where like a Debian would make it up to here was like it did, I think it was like a U limit, and you could do F-Sync and some other cool things, but all those settings got kind of pushed back into upstream Debian, and there's no real customizations in Pop! OS I miss anymore. So right now it's the pointless tier. However, I know System D has some really talented people over there, and they could move out of the pointless tier. Next up is Puppy Linux. It's either lightweight.
See the whole concept of NVIDIA spin with NVIDIA driver. The rest of the distros that include the NVIDIA driver now, you can thank Pop! OS for contribution to the overall community. So for me, that puts it up in amazing for fucking new users, you Chad.
Weight or creative and unique. It's weird. It's a strange distro. It's lightweight. They make custom. It has a strange package manager of like wolf and bark and these weird commands. I'm going to put it in the lightweight tier. It could also go to here just because of how it's designed, but not something I would use, and I probably should use a little more so I can give a little bit more better feedback. But right now I'm going to just throw it in the lightweight tier. Slackware is next. Creative and unique. Slackware is the original desktop Linux distribution, really. It's one of the very first Linux distributions. I want to say it's the oldest active Linux distribution. It's a little bit rough to work with, though. The package manager and some of the weirdness to Slackware. If you love compiling and building your own programs, Slackware's cool. There's a lot of OGs in Slackware. I don't want to say anything bad about it because it is the OG of Linux distributions. It's just not not my cup of tea, but I want to put it there. Next up is Solus, which has like a budgie environment. So it's like its own unique desktop environment. So they're not really copying much. It's not a fork of Debian. It's not a fork of anything, really. They create their own
Please
kernel.
get this fucking over with.
Solus, it's real niche. There's not a lot of guides on Solus, which makes it hard for new users or even intermediate users to use it. But if you're really familiar with Linux and you love the budgie desktop environment, Solus actually does a really good job of keeping up these things. And honestly, there's no forks. They build all their stuff. So end to end, Solus is kind of an amazing, unique distribution. Next up is going to be SUSE. Well, it's in the name, you know. It's enterprise Linux, and it's good for Linux. Businesses using Linux with I think the entire German government used it for several years. And yeah, it's one of those, if you're a business, you need support, and you want a desktop, SUSE is probably one of the ones I'd point to. As far as using it for day-to-day, for a normal user, OpenSUSE is there, and it's okay. It has some unique package managers with Zipper. It has a really unique like control panel-esque type thing with Yast, but it's not something I like because it's just a little too niche. But if I was in a business and I needed a support plan, I'd probably choose SUSE for like workstation environments. Next up is going to be Tails. And Tails is cool. It's obviously creative, unique. It's meant to run off of either a USB or CD, and it loads the entire Linux distro into memory. And then once you're done, you basically turn your computer off and everything's gone. So it's really good for like a one-off task that maybe you don't want any reminiscences of whatever happened there. I think even some governments ban Tails because they're afraid people use it for malicious purposes, and there won't be any way to track what they did. For me, it's like, I mean, honestly, I wish I had another distribution to toss in the creative, unique Cubes OS, which is Edward Snowden's one, where if you're interested in privacy, instead of using like a Tails, I'd use Cubes. It teaches compartmentalization. I did a couple of videos, an entire series on Cubes. That was really kind of amazing. Check it out if you want. Next up, Void Linux. This is another creative and unique one. You have a unique on non-system D one. Everything's built. It's not like a fork of a fork. It's a really cool distribution in Void. Highly recommend checking it out. I need to do a deeper dive on it, but it's a very unique distribution. And then we have TinyCore. This one is like obviously the king of lightweight. I think it runs on 20 or 40 megs of memory, something just ridiculously small, so TinyCore is kind of cool. And then we got two more, Zorin and Nubara. Zorin is something where I struggle. It's either the devil, it's either a new user, or it's pointless. And those are like the three categories where I'd throw Zorin. It has a pro plan where you pay $30 and it's a paid distribution, but at the same time I'm like, but it's really kind of like Chromebook-esque feel to it, to where anybody could pick it up and use it. And if I was just going to say a one-off person that needed maybe a support plan, Zorin's kind of where I'd lean them to if I wasn't the support. And I would be like, hey, just call them and you can get some support for it. I think Zorin would be okay for that. Me personally, it's pointless. But I don't want to knock it because it might be good for new users. And then I added one more, and that's Nubara. This is a Fedora fork made by Glorious Eggroll that is made for gaming. Glorious Eggroll knows Linux gaming better than pretty much anybody. And if you need just the best stock defaults and you just want to game in Linux, Nubara is where you should be. So if you're a gamer in Windows and you're like, I want to try Linux gaming, Nubara is where you go, because everything out of the gate is set. You don't have to know a whole lot about Linux. You can just install Nubara and go. It's really a well done distribution, even though I give it kind of a knock these days being based on Fedora, but to be expected because Glorious Eggroll, who makes it, actually works at Red Hat, so he knows it the best. And he does some of the best work out there when it comes to Linux gaming, because almost anybody that does Linux gaming knows about Proton GE, which is made by Glorious Eggroll, which makes Nubara, and he does all these great customizations to make Linux gaming a thing. So this is the
okay. So he also just in case this has been a long video, just in case I was muted, God knows. You're going to recommend, again, you recommend Spawn of the Devil, but it's only because it's one level removed from the Devil. It's still related to the Devil. Like, if you're going to talk about a principled approach and all this other shit, don't be a hypocrite. Like, Jesus fucking Christ. As far as Nabara and Proton GE and all the other stuff, I love all the work GE does. Most of the stuff I use as it relates to Proton is around GE. I don't use Nabara myself, but I love seeing and keeping up to date what he's doing, because that all of that, and this is again where Chris doesn't fucking get shit, ties back into all the other distros. Might be implemented different, might be changed different, etc., etc. But all that is brought into the other distros and utilized in different ways by the other distros. So, just as an example, for Proton GE, the way it is implemented in Garuda, there's a chaotic AUR. It has specifically tools and stuff for specifically Garuda that makes it so there is a always up-to-date version labeled like custom Proton, or I can't remember exactly what it's called in Steam, but it's like, and it shows like native AUR package in the Steam selection. That is a different way of implementing that, as opposed to like an Ubuntu or insert other distro here, because that allows Steam to actually use some of those as the default when I tell it to fucking use Proton GE as the default. So it's stuff like that that we are now seeing populate the other things in other distros that are now going and helping improve the gaming experience overall.
The Linux tier list. Let me know your hate down in the comments below because I trashed your distribution. Sorry, but I want to say you get my rationale for each one of these distributions as you've gone through.
I don't.
This gives you kind of an idea of why I put things in certain categories.
Okay, no, fucking no, I'm done. Like, fuck no, I'm done. This has been an hour and 10-minute video almost. Fuck no, I'm done. Short version, no. The way you look at the overall ecosystem and what these pointless distributions actually contribute, you are too fucking stupid and retarded to actually understand that it affects the overall ecosystem, and the approach that they take helps improve the overall ecosystem. If you don't understand that we now have decent NVIDIA support out of the box because of fucking Pop OS, or if you're too stupid to understand about out of the box experiences for distros, regardless of what they're fucking based on, because you talking constantly fucking preach about distros don't matter, but yet you talk about how the OG distros are the only ones that people should fucking use. You are, and then you want to talk about fucking, and then you want to talk about, you know, distros being the devil and the things that are based on them, etc., and don't like them, and you know, got to get away from them, etc. And then you want to use the spawn of the devil. You want to try to take a fucking, you know, principled approach to it, yet you are also the same jackassing tool that will go and make a Windows video. Like, you cannot try to be a fucking principle based on business decisions and then go running and screaming and doing content for fucking Microsoft or Apple, because it makes you fall on your face of your own fucking principles. And it makes you look like a fucking jackass and a hypocrite. Because honestly, that is the impression I get of you. You are a disingenuous fucking hypocrite who talks about principles, but you don't fucking live by them. So if you're gonna talk principles about any of this shit, at least go to the fucking extreme end of it and actually see it all through. Until you do, you are exactly what I'm saying you are. you're a hypocrite. And you just refuse to fucking acknowledge it. And you obviously refuse to acknowledge any contributions of any of these other distros you label pointless outside of what you conveniently decide to bend the knee for. Because right now, the only type of bending of my knee I want to do is taking a fucking arrow to it and maybe jabbing it through my goddamn skull. Because that would be so much more fun than having to waste this last fucking hour of my time with this video. We get it. You want to take a Windows approach and use only the OG distros, go the fuck ahead and use the OG distros. But to discount other distros, and I'm talking like legitimately honest contributions that they make and not understand what they actually contribute, be it in different ways to the overall ecosystem as the ecosystem currently stands, shows you're naive, you're stupid, and willfully ignorant to the overall fucking subject. So I'm done. Like, I'm done. Please, for the love of God, my ulcer and everything else when it relates to this fucking chatting douche, do not recommend these videos anymore. He proves everything I have been saying here. This is Lunduke 2.0 with a bigger audience and a whole lot bigger of a chatting, lying, toting, unprincipled, cocksucking douchebag. And that's where I'm going to end it. I'm right, I'm wrong, I really don't care. This is what you guys wanted to see. You wanted my honest opinion. This is why I don't like him, etc. He proves everything I'm saying just by this fucking list right here. And fire off in the comments.